light a little bit. Does look a little dark. Last few days it was a little too bright. And today it was a little bit dark. So there we go. Let's look. Where are we? Zoom. Hey, 23 people. Very good. Okay. So good evening. Did everybody see the video with the writer errors, seed mistakes, etc.? Do you have any questions about that? Let me know. Here, Karen says, video was great. Glad she wrote properly at the end. Yeah, she's actually a pretty good writer, you know, and the horse that we chose is very tolerant. You know, we wouldn't do that to a horse that's, you know, sensitive, because then if you show all these mistakes, you know, with a horse that's a little sensitive, then it could take you a couple of weeks to fix that again, you know, because it can be very confusing if you make all these mistakes, right? So we chose a horse that won't be traumatized by this. So, so yeah. And Katie McGatchy says, hello again, everyone. Great video. Thanks. Karen Jones says he was a rock star. Yeah, he was. He's a nice horse, actually. He's very sweet, very reliable, and yeah,
and for sale.
Good sports. Yeah, he's for sale too.
Not ours. We don't.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, not our horse, but yeah, a barn owner has him, and he's for sale. So yeah, so just checking on YouTube, see if there's anybody there, but it doesn't show me anything here at the moment. Well, good. Let's go back to Zoom. Yeah. Any questions? Anything you want to know? So, let me know. Or do you want to look at some more pictures of horses' conformation? Or do you want to talk about the seed? Seed errors, or
You need the wrong one.
oh, yeah. Rosie, let me know what you want to do. Do you want to look at videos? Okay, Karen says, I'm thinking that the Feldenkrais work you mentioned briefly would have a great impact on rider correctness. Yes, it does. That's why we incorporate more and more of the Feldenkrais work in all of our courses, because we had such a great response from the participants. And I think we did it the first time in our rain contact course. Because of course there's always, you know, the rider side of the coin. You know, if the horse doesn't go on the bit, you know, it can have all kinds of, you know, on the horse's side, all kinds of factors like lack of balance, lack of straightness, muscle blockages, lack of connectedness, etc. But there's always the rider side, right? Like you could see in the video today, if the rider is very unbalanced, very crooked, very stiff in the hips, or hanging on the reins, then of course the horse is unable to go on the bit. So that's why we added Feldenkrais lessons there in the rain contact course. And then there was such a hit that we just have done more and more. So now every course has some Feldenkrais lessons, and you know, we have the whole aware rider and Felden fit course programs that are very much centered around Feldenkrais lessons from Catherine, to help people, you know, become more aware of, you know, the movement patterns, postural patterns, etc. Right? So yeah. So yeah, definitely, if you feel like you need to improve your seat, Feldenkrais would be a great thing to incorporate. Yoga helps for suppleness. Definitely, yeah. It allows you to get more out of the time in the saddle. You know, when you do some yoga, some Feldenkrais, you could even do it to warm up. you know, before you get on the horse, that then, you know, you make it more out of the ride, because your body is already a little bit more supple, more warmed up, more balanced, and so on. Teresa says, I want to know about the fjord horse short neck. That can be a bit of an issue if the neck is very short, and especially if it's deep and short, and if the head is big, then the neck is not very supple. It doesn't give you a lot of variety of postures, right? Like when the hind legs come under the body more, flex more, the horse collects more, then they raise their neck a little bit more, so they elevate the neck more. But more elevation also means you need more longitudinal flexion, so the horse stays on the bit, right? And the short neck doesn't have that capacity to flex beyond a certain point. So then you find that, you know, with a low elevation, the horse can be on the bit, right? So the nose is somewhere near the vertical, right? And then you elevate the neck a little bit more, maybe because the horse is collecting more behind. Then you realize, you start feeling that now the pole doesn't feel so soft and supple anymore. It feels a little stiffer now. And then you elevate a little more. Now the nose is too far in front of the vertical. Now it's not really on the bit anymore, right? And then you have to find the right combination, you know, the right compromise of elevation and flexion. You may have to go up and down a little bit until you find where the best, you know, combination, best compromise is. Yeah. So in general, so for dressage horse, a short neck is a bit of a handicap. You know, it's better if they have a little bit longer neck. I mean, too long can be a problem too, because then either the neck becomes, you know, too flexible and too difficult to steady and to control, or it's so long that it creates a huge leverage effect, you know, wherever it goes, whether it's up or down or sticking out in front or whatever. Big long neck has a certain body mass, has a certain leverage effect on the body. So if it's a super long neck, it's hard, you know. If it's too short a neck, it's difficult to, you know. So Karen says looking at photos for evaluation would be helpful again. So we'll do that too. And then Eugene White says, hi from Wisconsin again, recognizing a problem. Rider or horse is the first step. Any general tips for fixing any of the 6 problems, especially when you don't have a regular instructor? So often wrong feels right and right feels wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't grip with my calves or hang on the reins, but the other 4 are all things I know I do. I've done them all, you know. Yeah, we in our rider makeover course that we start in January, we'll talk about those. A lot of it has to do with rider balance, how you support yourself in the saddle. You know, a lot of the issues are caused by the rider sitting too much on the seat bones with tight hips. You know, so stiff hip flexors and knees maybe too far up, and if you sit very much on your seat bones and your knees come up and your lower legs go forward, that often pushes you too far back in the saddle too. Then you're sitting too much on the lumbar spine of the horse. You have too much pressure on the lumbar spine of the horse, and that posture is often caused by not enough muscle tone around the lumbar spine. So your deeper core muscles may not be engaged enough, right? And then as a result, the hips lock up and so on. It's often kind of a domino effect. You know, it starts with one thing and then one thing leads to another, literally, you know, and that used to happen to me. Like seat mistakes would usually start with my core muscles losing power, you know, and then my hips would lock up and then I would tip forward with my shoulders and then, you know, the hands get rigid. And so it's like this cascade effect, you know. So it's good to find out where that begins. Like if you notice that there is this sort of domino effect, then try to find out what the first domino is that, you know, falls over. And for me, it was always lack of core muscle engagement, and I suspect that's the case for a lot of people. Yeah, you can experiment with supporting yourself differently, spreading your weight out over a larger area, smaller area, shifting the weight a little bit forward, backward, left, right, etc., and see, what allows you the best posture and what makes the horse move the best. Yeah. And Kjersti Jensen says, good evening and thanks for a great video. How important is the saddle fit in addition to all this? It plays a role, I mean, for both the horse and the rider, right? If the saddle somewhere digs into the horse's back somewhere, of course, then it's hard for the horse to really relax and go through the back and, on the bit. The saddle has to allow the rider to sit in balance. I personally don't like it if the saddle puts me too much into one particular place, like if the saddle sort of forces me to sit a certain way. I don't really like that. I like saddles that give me a little freedom to move around if I have to, if I want to. The deepest point of the saddle needs to be in the middle. Some saddles have the deepest point too far back, then you're sitting too much on the cantle, and you get into a chair seat, and then you're no longer really in balance, and the horse then will tighten his back usually. Then women often can't handle a very wide twist because of the shape of the pelvis, right? So that makes their hips hurt, and then they can't relax. That plays a role, right? You have to be able to sit comfortably so your hip joints don't get blocked by the saddle. Yeah, the way the stirrup leather is attached plays a role. If it's attached too far forward, then it moves your legs too far forward, right? And then you in order to sit correctly, you'd have to draw the stirrup irons back, so then the stirrup leather won't hang vertically, but it'll be angled back, towards your foot, which you can do. I mean, I've ridden in saddles like that. Some of my old Passier saddles, they were a little like that, and it's a bit of a struggle. So you're fighting the saddle a little bit. You can eventually get there, and sit correctly anyway, but it makes life harder than it needs to be. It's better if you have a saddle that just allows you to just sit there, let your legs hang, and then they're in the right place, and so on. So, and that is very much a matter of personal preference, right? Everybody tends to have their own favorite saddle maker or saddle model, and so on. And so it's good to try a variety of saddles out with your horse, see which one your horse likes, and see which one allows you to sit balanced without any effort, really. Yeah. Then let me see. So Jay Helliker says, are seat errors the cause of top line development, or does a crooked horse cause seat errors? I know it's a combination, but where does one start? It can go either way, right? A crooked horse can make the rider sit crooked. Like if they really insist on pushing one hip up, then you're constantly sliding down into a hole on the other side. That can make it very difficult to sit correctly. On the other hand, a rider who has a crooked seat or stiff seat will make the horse crooked and stiff. So the horse ends up mirroring the rider. So you have to kind of approach it from both ends, right? So you have to work on the rider's seat a little bit, and you can do this with yoga and Feldenkrais lessons. The old-fashioned lunge lessons work too if you have an instructor who does that, and if you have a reliable horse that you can use. But you also have to work on the horse, right? The more balanced the horse is, the straighter the horse is, the easier he'll be to sit, right? The more he will allow you to sit correctly. So I would approach it from both ends, And when I ride myself, that's how I do it, right? I always try to be aware of my seat and try to adjust my seat so I feel like I can guide my horse the most effectively, and I can Yeah, stay out of the way, not interfere, not bother the horse with the seat, and with that seat that doesn't get in the way, but that's close to the horse, then I try to direct the horse and make him straighter, make him more balanced, right? So it sort of goes back and forth. So Karen Daum says, what kind of muscles should I engage to take the weight off the seat bones without tightening in the hips? You'll probably find that the muscles around your lumbar spine solidify a little bit. It's almost, it used to feel to me like my body density increases there, like the muscle ring, above the rim of the pelvis, below the lowest rib, that just needs a certain stability, It's usually not a conscious engaging of any muscles, but if you just think of spreading your weight around the rib cage, so it's like you're pouring the weight like it's water, around the rib cage, then your center of gravity lowers a little bit, and you're supported by an area that's below the spine of the horse, right? Because you're resting a little on the ribs of the horse. And in order to do that, you will need to engage the core muscles to a certain extent, and they do that by themselves as you're trying to spread the weight around the rib cage and trying to find support below the line of the back. You could also, lift both thighs off a little bit and roll the femur in your hip joint, let the leg hang again. As you're taking both legs off and rotate them in, you'll probably find that your lumbar spine area is getting a little bit more stable, and so the muscles around that are engaging a little bit more. Yeah, and that pouring of your weight around the rib cage, that also allows your hips to stay loose and supple. Whereas if you're sitting just on your seat bones on top of the horse's spine, then your hips will be more likely to lock up and get tight. Also, if your legs rotate out, if your femurs rotate out, it tends to block the hip joints, right? Whereas if you can roll them in and then occasionally lift off by engaging the muscles on the outside of the thighs, then the hip joints stay a lot more flexible. Yeah. And Karen Jones says, I think that functional movement for the human is just as important on the ground exercises also. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the old days, there was no Feldenkrais, and yoga wasn't known in Europe, and so in the old days you learned to ride by taking lunge lessons, and trotting without stirrups until you either relaxed or fell off, so that was the old way of doing it, right? But now we have all these additional methodologies you can use, Alexander technique too, and variety of things, right? And they allow you to progress faster with your seat, because they can create better body awareness, better balance, greater flexibility, and so on. And Teresa says, I know a fjord that's in Prix St. George. Yeah, there used to be a stallion, I think, that was a Grand Prix horse even like 20 years ago, almost, or 15 years ago. There are some, but when you look at the conformation of the fancy fjords, so to speak, that are competing at the FEI levels, they don't have the short stubby neck. They have a little bit longer and more arched neck, and they're a little bit thinner around the poll and throat latch, so they can elevate and flex. And the more sort of old style, draft horsey ones with a neck that's set on lower and short and really, really deep, they will find it difficult, to make it to the upper levels. And Christina says, aha, write a makeover course. That sounds interesting. It will be.
Yes, it really
will be useful, yeah. Melody says, hi, I'm noticing on the horses I rode yesterday, the horses with straighter hind legs do push more. Exactly. And the ones with more angle don't push as much and feel more suspension. Yes. I put poles down slightly raised here and there to get more push for the horses that don't thrust as much, seem to help. Yep. interesting to understand the mechanics of conformation. Thank you for sharing all this info. Yeah, we just, in the German group, we just had basically that question about hind leg angles. And it's true, the hind legs that are straighter, where the hocks are more extended or the stifles are more extended, they tend to push more. They don't flex as much, which means they can be a little rougher to sit. The jumpers often like them because they have a little bit more power. They often have, you know, pretty good passage because they have the powerful push. But you have to really train them to sit and flex. So with those horses with a very straight hind legs, often you will need to do a lot of you know, voltas and figure eights and lateral movement. So overall more collected work, you know, and more collected gaits. And the horses that are sickle hocked, you know, with more flexed hind leg angles, they, yes, tend to be softer to sit. They carry more, but they don't push as much, right? So, and they can also get behind the aids, you know, because they're not really pushing. So with those, you have to develop the pushing power and ride them in freer gaits, maybe not so many lateral movements, maybe more straight, more forward. The sickle hocked ones are also a little bit more susceptible to hurting the hocks and developing spelling, you know, because the hocks kind of work a little too much, flex too much, work too much, you know, and so you have to counterbalance that by riding more forward, right? So yeah, the sickle hocked ones will probably do the piaffe a little bit more easily. Now the straight legged ones do the passage a little more easily. Yeah. Very good. Let me just check real quick on YouTube. 12 people watching, but no questions. So here were a few Q&A questions here. On the Q&A section, Leon Macmillan says, you talked about a horse trailing legs behind. You have an example of this in motion. Not handy, not at the moment. There's when the horse trails the hind legs, then you see the soles of the hind feet when you're behind it. It's like the horse shows you the sole of his hoof, or it shows you his shoes.
Maybe somebody has some footage of their horse doing this and they can post it in the group.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody has that, you can post it in the group. Yeah, so when the horse is flexing, especially the hock joint, more in the air, then the fetlock will fold more too, and the fetlock kind of moves forward and up towards the belly, and then you won't see the sole of the hind foot from behind. Whereas if the hock angle is too open to extend it, it just hangs essentially. And then you see the soles of the hind feet. So that better when they fold it and snatch it up more. So, oh, good. Melody says, I know of a horse like that. We'll try to get a photo and post. It's a hunter. Yeah, it makes sense. So, for the hunter movement, that kind of fits. So, Beth Brown says, thanks for this discussion again. You're welcome. Diane says, hi, I've only just joined the series, so excuse me for being late. But the question I have is for my dressage pony who's recovering from colic surgery 12 weeks ago. He's 19 years old and was working at advanced medium level previously. Does the colic surgery need any special requirements? The vets say start work this week, and I was surprised that they said he can be cantering within 4 to 6 weeks. Depending on what they did exactly for the surgery, if they had to cut a lot, make a big incision in the abdominal muscles, then that'll be all gone, right? So then he has to regrow new abdominal muscles, and that can take a while. But yeah, Shanna was just saying, talk to the vet. I would coordinate with the vet, and I would start with lunging, double lunging, maybe a little work in hand. Develop the belly muscles. Yeah, you could do this with a little bit of sidestepping. You can do in hand a little, sidestepping on the circle that the inside hind crosses a little. In the walk, it's all pretty mild. You don't have to worry about hurting the horse. And yeah, practice some transitions at the lunge line and double lunge line. And you can alternate between a little forward downward stretching and bringing the horse up again. Things like that, yeah, transitions. And so the horse just needs to be conditioned again, and then gradually. I mean, once you can do canter work, then you can do trot canter transitions or walk canter transitions at the lunge line or double lunge line, and that will engage the belly muscles and strengthen the belly muscles. So yeah, that's basically it, right? So the horses with the colic surgeries, they often, have the issue of no more belly muscles when they come back, right? So I guess it's a little bit like a woman who has a cesarean, birth. They, when the belly muscles are cut, then takes a while to regrow, and develop that abdominal muscle strength. Yeah. And Sharon Francis, hi Thomas, when out hacking my horse early, I have much more time to sense what's happening under my seat as I'm mostly in the walk. What I've noticed is that regardless of how I try to sit, for example, both seat bones equal, not collapsing in my waist, etc., I still seem to feel that my right leg is further forward than my left leg, and I'm sitting squint. My horse is hollow left and stiff right. Interesting. And tends to fall out of his right shoulder. Today I played with bracing my back more, lightening my seat, so that I was spreading the weight more over his back, as well as doing the kneeling seat. However, I still seem to end up back in the same position. Is there a good chance Efren is putting me there? And if so, how do I stop that from happening? Like, for example, engage core more, brace my back even more, and ensure I keep his shoulders between my knees. He has a tendency to wiggle around. Good question. It's interesting that your right leg is more forward if your horse is stiff on the right. Because if the horse is hollow left, stiff right, then his pelvis should be positioned so that his left hip is more forward, his right hip more back. If your right leg is more forward anyway, maybe you're flexing your right hip joint more. So it could be your asymmetry, for example, or you could look at whether your right hip or right femur is rotated outward or inward, or can you stretch and extend the hip joint on the right, or is it kind of closed? Do you feel like the hip flexors are contracted on the right? That would pull your right leg forward. So it could be a variety of reasons why you end up with your right leg forward. So I suspect that it has to do with your seat. Of course, the straighter the horse is, the more balanced he is, the easier it is to sit correctly, right? But the way you're describing your seat seems a little bit opposite of the horse's crookedness, which is why I'm thinking maybe there's something in your right hip joint or right femur, or femur rotated out, or hip joint flexed too much so that your right knee is too far forward, right lower leg too far forward. Something like that. And she said, and then Sharon says also, I also wanted to feedback that I tried some of your double lunging suggestions yesterday for the left rein, like for the transitions trot walk, immediately back up to trot, release the inside rein, bend a little with the outside rein, and doing squares and rectangles. Had great success with these tips, and he went much better, almost the same as on the right rein. It's awesome. She said he didn't have time to drop his head or twist his paw as I kept him busy. He seemed to enjoy it too and gave some nice trot steps at the end. Whoopee. That's awesome.
Whoopee. That's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you help him get more balanced, he'll feel better, right? So if he's more balanced, he feels better, he can move with greater freedom. So then the movement becomes more brilliant, right? Whereas if he's a little out of balance, a little crooked, etc., then the gaits become smaller, and range of motion diminishes, right? But yeah, it's great. I'm glad that it worked so well. It's awesome. Very good. So very good. Let me look at YouTube. There are no questions there. And Miro just came in, wanted something. Well, any other questions? Okay, Gene White says, just posted a picture to the group with my horse in harness, trailing hindquarters. Excellent. Let's see if I can find that. To go to the right window. So, here you see it a little bit, exactly. Let me just make this a little bigger. Yep. So, share picture, share window. Yeah, here, exactly. Here you see that a little bit, right? The horse is lifting the hind leg sort of, but yeah, you see the sole of the foot, you see the shoe of the hind leg, right? And he's not flexing the hock in the air very much. So it's when they go in the sort of relaxed, comfortable jog or slow trot, then that's what happens, and if he moves out with more energy and flexes the hind leg more on the ground. So if he flexes the right hind leg more, he will fold the left hind leg in the air more, right? And that requires a little bit more energy, right? It requires also more engagement of the belly muscles. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to snap the hind leg up and move it forward. Yeah, so that's a good example of the hind leg, sort of hanging down a little bit, and yeah, because he's not folding the hind leg, he might even draw a line with the toe in the sand. Like I've seen horses in the past where they would really drag toe lines in the footing, because they were not lifting the hind legs at all. And if the footing is dusty, they create huge clouds of dust. Whereas the horse that lifts the hind leg up with good energy and snaps it up and moves it forward, they don't create any dust, even if the footing is a little dusty. So yeah, very interesting. Let me see. Morgan Mello says, I have the same problem as Sharon, but my left leg is more forward. This is more obvious as we go up the gates. Every rug he has slides to the left. He had a break for 4 months, which I think has set his straightness back to his old pattern. Yeah, but that sounds that your horse is hollow left, and so that makes sense. If the rug slides to the left, it's probably because the right hind leg is more extended, the right hip is higher, so everything slides over to the left. You may also feel like in the saddle you're sliding off to the left. Your saddle slides to the left if the horse doesn't have a lot of withers. And if the horse is hollow left, then his left hip is a little in advance, the right hip a little back. And then he will probably make you mirror his pelvic position. So that would make sense. So in Margaret's case, it sounds like it originates in the horse's crookedness. And in Sharon's case, it sounds like it may be more in Sharon's hip joint and femur, maybe. Yeah. So Leslie Wolf said, I did in-hand work today on a 6-meter circle. He steps wide on both hind legs. The only way to get him step under the center of mass is to do shoulder in or travers. Yeah. Yeah, 6-meter circle is pretty small, depending on how big the horse is and whether you're in the walk or the trot. Small circles can, tempt the horse to evade somewhere, especially like if the radius or diameter of the circle is a little smaller than what the hind legs can support comfortably, then he may step wide or he may try to get crooked and evade somehow. And then one thing you could try is enlarge the circle. and see if there is a size of the circle where he doesn't step wide behind. Because they step wide to avoid collection, right? And it could be that he feels like a 6 meter circle is a little harder to do than he can handle, or it's more work than he wants to do. Could be too. And then you could see if there is a size of circle where he steps normally and not wide. Yeah, and doing lateral movements is the other option. Of course, you can always do that, but that's more difficult than for the horse, right? So yeah, it's interesting, huh? Yeah. So yeah, I would probably I would play with both. I would see if I make the 6 meter circle bigger, like does the horse step wide at 6 meters diameter, but not at 8 meters diameter, for example, right? And then maybe stay with the diameter that the horse can handle without stepping wide, and then gradually make it smaller as the horse gets stronger. Or yeah, if you decide, I'm going to stay with the 6 meters, and I'm going to do shoulder inner haunches in, then you can listen to the horse, observe the horse, like the smaller circle lateral movement. Does the horse get tense, for example? Does he get resistant, or does he show signs of discomfort, that sort of thing? And then decide whether it's too early to do the smaller diameter, or whether it's something he can do and he can learn, so yeah, it depends. So then, okay, Leslie Wolf says small circle was in walk. He doesn't do it on a bigger circle. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. But in the walk, 6 meters is not that big of a deal. So then, at the walk, you can do probably your shoulder in, haunches in. That should strengthen the hind legs and should make them more supple. So that could be a good thing to do. If you do it at the trot, would also be interesting. How small a circle can the horse do at the trot without stepping wide or before he steps wide. You can use these exercises to check out the boundaries or the limits of the horse's ability. How small a circle can you make before he steps wide, or before I lose something of the quality of the gait. So that could be an interesting thing to play with. Then Corey says, I have a horse who leaves a trail in the sand when he trots. Then when I get him working his butt more, he feels downhill because the front legs aren't elevating. What do you suggest to do to fix this situation? Yeah, it's interesting, right? What is probably happening is that when you engage the hind legs more, right? So he steps more under, then the hind legs, essentially receive a larger share of the weight, right? And if that feels difficult, or the hind legs are not strong enough yet, not flexible enough yet, the horse will probably react to that by pushing his croup up and lowering the head and neck. So he's on the forehand, and that's why the front legs are not coming off the ground, right? So in that case, engage the hind legs and see if you can flex the hind legs so that the croup lowers a little bit and the head and neck get elevated. So, and you can do this by riding turns. So you can ride voltas, figure eights, you can do smaller rectangles, squares, you could do 10 by 20 meter rectangles, you can do diamonds. Like within the circle, you can do diamonds by riding straight lines from circle point to circle point, and at each circle point you ride a quarter pirouette. So each turn shifts the weight from the outside shoulder to the inside hind. You can do down transitions into the hind legs, like walk, halt, trot, walk even. So the more the horse starts flexing his hind legs, the more he will probably elevate the head and neck, and the more the shoulders will start to lift as well. So yeah, so it sounds like when that you're getting him to engage the hind legs more now. The next thing to do is to teach him to sit more and flex the hind legs more. And you can do this with turns, with down transitions. Essentially, you can do it with a little bit of rein back, but try to make it slow, short steps in the rein back. Try to get the torso of the horse to move back across the hocks before the hind legs start moving, because otherwise the hind legs will just run away, you know, and then the croup will be up and he'll be on the forehand in the rein back. So then to prevent that, it's good to take a halt, take a couple of steps forward to bring the hind legs more under the body, take a couple of steps back, take a couple of steps forward, and so on, back and forth. And then over time, the hind legs will get more supple. The chorus says, "Thank you. I'll try that." Yeah, it should work. So it's sort of a classic reaction for the horse that you make life harder for him, so he tries to find a way out of that. You know, how can I protect my hind legs so they don't have to flex that much under the weight? You know, so but yeah, gradually it'll get better, you know, as you work on that. Then Leon McMillan says, "I know I have difficulty keeping my right leg back. Is it correct that this will probably close the hip mine and allow the hindquarters to slide right as we travel left on a circle?" Yeah. Additionally, would there be a reason why the horse doesn't want to connect on the right rein? Yeah, it's probably all connected. So if you have trouble keeping your right leg back when you're going on a circle to the left, then your hip flexors are probably contracted. They're not releasing enough. Yeah, that makes it difficult to frame the right hind leg, so the horse is likely to then push the croup out. Of course, it could be that your horse is stiff left, hollow right, so that would be his natural tendency anyway. And he'll try to lean on the left shoulder, and he won't. And he brings his right hip too far forward, which brings your right hip too far forward. So then you may be fighting against his crookedness and, you know, some asymmetry maybe in your body, right? So this makes it all more difficult. And then that's, you know, the reason why he doesn't make contact on the right rein when you're going left. So I assume he's hollow right, stiff left. So he leans on the left shoulder. He wants to either push the shoulder a little to the left or the croup to the right, or both. So circling left, he will lean on the inside shoulder. He will probably lean a little on the inside rein, or have more contact on the inside rein. His croup will want to go out. He'll try to counter bend, and he's a little behind the outside rein. So a good way to fix it would be to enlarge the circle a couple of strides, right? Shift your own weight more to the outside, maybe step into the outside stirrup a few times. Could be any front, rear combination. And then by enlarging, you can move his rib cage out, you transfer the weight more to the outside pair of legs. And then the more the weight gets transferred to the outside pair of legs, the more he will start to lighten up on the inside rein and approach the outside rein. And then you have contact on the outside rein, and the horse will be light on the inside and bending to the inside. Yeah, so it's all connected. Essentially, all the symptoms that you're discovering are crookedness symptoms. And it could be that it's just the horse's crookedness that sort of puts you in that position. Could also be that you have a little bit of a more contracted right hip or right hip flexors. That's something where Feldenkrais would really help too, and maybe yoga. Yeah. And Sharon France says, yes, that is interesting. It could well be my right hip that is tighter. When sensing my two sides on the floor with Feldenkrais lessons, my right side always feels bigger and heavier, whereas the left flatter and longer. I also have a tendency to fall out of my right side and weight the outside of my right foot. I did try switching legs earlier, for example, left more forward, right further back. However, it felt odd, but possibly may have looked normal to an observer. Yeah, just because it feels odd doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means your body's not used to that. Your body wants to get back to what it knows, right? Back to the old comfort zone. But it might be interesting to play with that. And then what I would then do when you experiment with a different body alignment is check in with the horse. Does that make the horse feel better or worse, right? If you adjust your seat. And it could be that now, after this adjustment, the horse becomes rounder, lifts the back more, bends better, releases the paw more. Then, that's an improvement over the way I used to sit. And the horse clearly approves, right, and feels more comfortable, is happier with the seat. And then if that's the case, then you may have to learn to live with that or do it more, because it will feel weird to you, may feel uncomfortable to you. But in those cases, the rider comfort is not important. It's the horse's comfort that counts. I mean, I've been there, done that many times too, that I felt like a pretzel, but the horse was going nicely. I thought, well, this is obviously the way I need to sit, but it feels weird, and didn't take very long though. If I just tried to stay where the horse told me to be, so that he would be, vertical to the ground with his legs, bending the spine, bending the rib cage, etc., on the bit, through the back. When I stayed in that position, I got used to it pretty quickly, and then it didn't feel so odd anymore. It was just for a little bit, Yeah. Leon says, yeah, thank you. We contribute to each other's weaknesses. That's usually the way it goes, right? I mean, none of us are symmetrical, and every human is a little asymmetrical. Even the chief riders at the Spanish riding school are a little asymmetrical. Even the Olympic champions are a little asymmetrical. And so are the horses, right? So even the gold medalist at the Olympic Games or the best trained horse in one of the big schools, will still be a little bit asymmetrical. I mean, sort of the average rider may not be able to see it or feel it, but the trainer will always know. The trainer will always feel that there's still a little bit more crookedness that I need to get rid of, right? So until the horse dies, until we die. So that's lifelong, right? So yeah, we can never get rid of all the last bit of asymmetry. There'll always be some left, and we just have to try and work with it, diminish it, become functionally straight, so we can turn equally easily left and right. The horse can move his hips equally easily left and right, bend equally easily left and right. Which involves a little bit of adjusting and compensating for the crookedness of both horse and rider, which means you may have to ride a left bend rider differently than a right bend, or for your shoulder in left, you may have to sit a little differently than for your shoulder in right. Not mirror image, right, but slightly adjusted. Or left lead canter, right lead canter, half pass left, half pass right. These things, there's not an identical mirror image seat for left and right. There is a slight, difference, because you're riding a slightly different horse, left and right. So Vanessa is saying when the horse is moving along and swinging the pelvis laterally, the lumbar spine should also rock along with the pelvis. What exercises can help horses that keep a stiff lumbar spine and don't swing enough in that area? Sometimes the T17, 18 will be tender to palpation on one side or the other on these horses. How interesting. That is interesting. Let me read that again. So the horse is moving along, swinging, pelvis laterally, lumbar should rock along, exactly. When the lumbar spine is stiff. Then if the lumbar spine is stiff, what about the rib cage? Is the rib cage stiff too? I would think that the rib cage then probably doesn't swing enough left and right like a pendulum, probably. So with those horses, you can do or use the principle that you take the hind leg that was the outside one in your last turn or your last movement and make it into the inside one and let it sidestep. So you could do shoulder in left, stop, turn on the forehand from the right leg, turn on the forehand in motion, right? And then maybe shoulder in right, and then stop and do turn on the forehand in motion from the left leg, or ride a volte left, and then afterwards shoulder in right, and then volte right, shoulder in left, and you can do this on the center line, so the voltes are left and right on the center line, and the shoulder in is always on the center line. Or you can do it as a serpentine, first loop maybe on the left rein, volte left, then go straight across, but in a shoulder four or shoulder in right position. On the opposite long side, volte right, 1.5 times, and then back to the old long side, shoulder in left, volte left, and so on, back and forth. That's a great exercise too that I like. On the long side, you can do a volte, then a little counter shoulder in, straight, volte to the inside, counter shoulder in, that sort of thing. We can do this on the circle too. That usually mobilizes the rib cage and the lumbar spine. So change the bend, shift the weight, change the bend, and engage the hind leg. That was just the outside one in the last turn or in the last movement you rode. So that I find is usually quite effective. And Christina says, what do you think about backing up the hill, not steep from the ground? We tried it, but my mare tends to slide her hind feet on the ground. Should I try it or not at all? She does it also on a flat ground, but not as much as on a hill. Yeah, backing up the hill a few steps. Yeah, I'm not surprised that the horse would drag her feet, up if you back up the hill. What you could do is do it up the hill a couple of times, and I would probably also just do 2-3 steps if that, and then maybe stop or let the horse advance a couple of steps down the hill, back up a couple of steps up the hill, down the hill, up the hill. And then maybe go to a level ground and then rein back on level ground and see if it's better now. Because it could be that while the horse is dragging her feet uphill, she might then step back better when you're on level ground, something like that. So yeah, I would experiment with what works. If you feel like it's not helping my horse or if it's making things worse, then I wouldn't do it. But if you feel like, yeah, it's helping, then you can incorporate that in the training. And keep in mind also that sometimes horses struggle with an exercise. They have a hard time with whatever you're asking at the moment, but they're better afterwards when you go straight after the exercise. That's why it's always important when you do any kind of movement or exercise that you observe exactly how the horse is doing the exercise. Like, is it easy? Is it hard? What mistakes are happening? What part of the exercise is he struggling with? But then also go straight afterwards. I always like to then go straight in the next higher gait, and feel the horse and see how the horse is moving. Is he better now than he was before the exercise, or is he worse than he was before the exercise? And very often the horse is better after the exercise, even though the exercise itself didn't look very pretty, didn't feel very good, but afterwards the horse is much improved. So gymnastically, it did its job, right? Yeah. Oops. Now I wanted to check on YouTube. See if anybody asked the question. No, nothing.
No questions.
No, I didn't say anything.
We have people watching.
I know there's 16 people on Zoom, on YouTube. Yeah. And yeah, Christina says, yeah, thank you. Yes, we go back, forward, back, forward. Good to know about the comparing part. Makes sense. Yeah. It's important always. I mean, we don't do our movements or exercises to kill time, right? At least hopefully we don't. But we have a kind of an idea in our mind of something we would like to improve or something we would like to find out. Sometimes we do exercises or movements to learn something about the horse or to gather data about something, right? And so you have to observe how the horse does it, and then you have to observe how the horse is afterwards. Because hopefully, the horse's gaits and posture and balance, etc., improve with the exercises we do. And if we find that the horse is worse afterwards, then either we didn't ride the exercise very well, or it's the wrong exercise for the horse at this stage of training, right? And if that happens, that you feel like, no, this is not leading in a good direction, makes my horse feel worse, then stop doing the exercise, but maybe try it again in 3 months, or 6 months, and then see if the horse can now do it. Because it could be that an exercise that produces a bad result today will produce a really good result in 6 months or in a year, So just because something didn't work today doesn't mean that it will never work. It just means like right now, wrong exercise, but there could come a time in his training where this will be the perfect thing to do, right? To address whatever issue the horse has. Yeah. 6 months from now, a year from now, etc. Yeah. Good. Lots of great questions. And Nessa says, if the ribs are stiff, how do we determine if it's a diaphragm thoracic sling issue? If they trouble lifting, it's diaphragm. If they have trouble lifting, it's diaphragm. If they have trouble swinging, it's loins and lumbar. That's a good question. Yeah, when the ribs are stiff, the horses often hold their breath. So it might be a diaphragm issue. I'm just thinking. Often when the rib cage is stiff, the horses are not well connected from the weight through the feet to the ground. In other words, the horses often don't have a good sense of where their feet are, and they don't like to shift the weight. They have one favorite front leg usually, or one favorite side of the body, and that's where the weight stays all the time, right? And in order to be really flexible and to be able to move equally well left and right, the horse has to shift the weight from one side to the other. And that's something that you can teach the horse by sidestepping, and doing these volte left, shoulder in right kind of combinations, or shoulder in left, turn on the forehand from the right leg. The weight goes back and forth a lot. And that teaches the horse where his feet are, and he learns that he can actually support the body weight with all 4 feet. And then they often start relaxing, and then the rib cage starts softening. I think often the stiffness in the rib cage is sort of the horse guarding himself against falling down. So there can be a psychological, emotional aspect to it too, not strictly physical, but it's a combination of physical and mental issues. If the back isn't lifting enough, and I guess maybe the hind legs are not coming under the body enough, abdominal muscles not engaging enough, that kind of thing. Yeah, good question. It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the swinging of the back, the up and down swing, also has to do with the connection of the feet to the ground, especially connection of the hind legs. The rib cage can get laterally stiff if the front legs are not well connected, or really any leg is not well connected to the ground. When the hind legs are not connecting to the ground, not flexing and so on, then the horse won't lift his back, he won't swing in his back. So there's a balance component, there's a body awareness component. So often the stiffness and rigidity that you feel is not necessarily a tight, contracted muscle that needs to be stretched, but it's sometimes this combination of the horse not balancing himself well, not supporting himself well, then being nervous that he might fall down. And so he contracts the muscles as a protection against falling, and so trying to stay on his feet even though he feels out of balance. And then when you help him find his balance, it could be that he softens and relaxes in a short amount of time without any stretching in that sense, So so these are avenues you could try out and pursue. Very good. Well, any more questions? Or let's see. Or do you want to look at some pictures? Yeah, if there. Good. So Vanessa is saying that makes sense. I work with a few endurance riders and I have had trouble explaining the disconnections. Yeah, the endurance riders, of course, what they do is they go straight, right, in a pretty high tempo, probably usually. So these horses are not used to doing a lot of bending and sidestepping and sort of, so yeah, I could see how their backs would be rigid and the rib cage get stuck and so on.
Rib cage especially.
So yeah, so they may have to do, to counteract that and counterbalance that, they may have to do a lot of voltas and serpentines and figure eights and lateral movements just to, create sort of a suppleness to counteract the hundreds of miles that they go straight.
It's almost like we have a bad relationship between, or not bad, but an imbalance between strength and suppleness. They have a lot of strength. Endurance horses.
Courses, could you describe how to have your horse connect their feet to the ground? We use stirrup stepping. So when you put a little pressure in the stirrup on one side, then you send your body weight through the horse's foot that's on the ground on that side at that moment, right? And I always picture that as water that flows through pipes. It's like I picture my body and the horse's body as hollow, and like a pipe system, like a plumbing system, and my weight is like water that you send through pipes into the ground, or like when you picture the rain falling on the roof and then gathering in the gutters and then flowing through a pipe down into the ground and so on. So if that pipe that connects to the ground is clogged, then the gutters will probably overflow, or because the water doesn't have a place to go, so it's spilled somewhere. And yeah, if you remove the clog, then the water goes through the pipe all the way into the ground. It's kind of like that with our weight and the horse's weight. If you step into the stirrup, you're channeling your body weight through that, whichever leg is on the ground at the moment on that side. And then if the horse is supple in that quarter of the body, then everything feels soft and no resistance and so on. The weight goes into the ground and you can feel how the leg of the horse, the foot might stay on the ground a little longer than it normally would. It gets more elastic, gets more bouncy. If there is muscle tension in that quadrant of the horse, then you step into the stirrup and the horse braces, and he might go above the bit and invert somehow until the muscle blockage is removed, and then it goes through. And then you can increase the simple stepping into individual legs by stopping into the forelegs, right? Or doing just even down transitions from trot to walk, from walk to halt, from trot to halt. And by stopping into each leg, you can redistribute the weight from one corner of the body to the next and so on. So the horse gets a better sense of how many legs he has, where the legs are. He gets a sense of his legs being strong enough to carry the weight and not snapping off just because you put the weight in there and so on. So that's a good way to teach the horse better body awareness, for example. Yeah. Then Jen here says, if the horse is more stiff on one side than the other, would it be the stiff side legs that are not as connected to the ground, or the legs on the opposite side that are not connected? Do you stirrup step into the stiff side or away from it? Well, I do everything. I do patterns usually that move the weight around, either front to back, back to front, or from side to side, or a combination, right? There's an unlimited number almost of possibilities that you have. The rocking is usually effective because the horse can't brace against you. If you just step more or less statically into one leg repeatedly, then the horse could build up a brace against that, with his body. But if you move the weight around, then there's nothing for him to brace against, right? And that has a loosening and suppling effect. And as to which legs are better connected, that can vary from horse to horse. For some horses, sometimes the legs on the stiffer side seem to be better connected, sometimes less well connected. Sometimes it's a diagonal pair that seems better connected, and the other diagonal less well connected. So it depends. There's a bit of a variety between the horses. So let me go back here and zoom. Okay, so those were the Zoom questions so far. So I could start looking at some pictures. I have to find some. Let's see here. Oh, interesting. So Karen Jones has a 15-year-old Lipizan and illusion gelding. Let me take a look at that, if that's okay. So here's the first picture. Actually looks pretty nice, and it does look a little bit like a combination of Lipizan and illusion. So yeah, so the shape of the croup is not bad. There's a little bit of a point here, like the line of the back rises a little bit towards the croup, and then you see a little bit of an angle here where the lumbar spine and the croup meet. It's not dramatic, it's not bad. He's got fairly prominent withers, especially, you know, for Lipizan. Lipizans usually have less withers than that. And I've, you know, this last week and the week before, I've looked at so many different horses from different breeds, and it's often noticeable how horses with big withers have a bit of a concave line of the back, and then often have this little rise of the lumbar spine towards the croup with a little bit of an angular transition into the pelvis. And then, so the shape of the neck itself is not bad. It's nice and deep at the base, it's thinner at the top. It doesn't have a lot of length, but if you can see the contours of the pole muscles, neck muscles enough, then he's supple enough. Yeah, that here you see he's flexible in the pole, because when the neck is not very long, then that can become a concern, that they lose a little flexibility here, but he has no problem with that. So it looks very nice here, actually. Also, it looks like his loin is pretty strong, and the croup looks nice and round here. And so there he's under saddle. Yeah. So yeah, no, he has no problem carrying himself well, right? So yeah, there too. Could, you know, overall he could flex his hind legs a little bit more. So, because here it looks like he's landing and he's about to land, right? And looks like he's pushing the croup up just a little bit. Would be interesting to see him like a, you know, 1/10 of a second later once he's landed, and to see if he flexes the hind leg joints once he's touched down, or whether he pushes the croup up. Here it also looks like he might be pushing the croup up a little bit. So if you look at the overall posture, but he's built well, you know, I should be able to you know, teach him also to flex the hind legs more, etc. So yeah, interesting. So, and here Leslie, Karen Jones says, that's fantastic observations. Riding has been a challenge. Thank you. Yeah, it looks like he likes to keep the hind legs a little extended, but you can fix that. You can change it, right, with lots of transitions and the combinations of sidestepping and turning, you know, like shoulder in volte, or enlarge the circle and ride a volte, shoulder in turn on the haunches, combinations like that. And Karen says, we've just started that long reining. Okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, shoulder in 90-degree turn, because you're maybe riding a rectangle or a square, so you could ride a shoulder in on the rectangle or on the square, ride a 90-degree turn, stop. Then you could even rein back around the corner. That would put a lot of weight on the hind leg and really compress it between the weight and the ground, and then continue forward, you know, that sort of thing. Then Leslie Wolf says, my horse has a lovely walk. He can collect, medium, and extend. How can I get this in trot? Yeah, the extension of the hind legs improves as you increase the flexion of the hind legs. Like, so the more he steps under and flexes the joints of the hind legs, the more room he has to extend the joints, open it, and to push again. So you may have to collect him more before you're asking for a lengthening in the trot. And of course, you can use the two corners before the lengthening, so the two corners of the short side, or you could ride a shoulder in the trot, and then from the shoulder in go onto the diagonal, lengthen a few strides, maybe collect again, lengthen again, so that in the lengthening he doesn't fall apart, because that can happen, right? So it's good to lengthen a little bit, just a few strides, then collect again, because if you lengthen too big, so to speak, make the trot strides too big, the horse can fall apart, push the croup up, lean on the reins, etc. Same thing when you lengthen for too many strides, the horse may not be able to hold it for that long, and then he may also fall on the forehand and lose the engagement of the hind leg. So it's good to prepare the lengthening by engaging a hind leg, then push a little forward, let the horse push a little, lengthen the stride, bring the horse back again, and so on. So that would be, it takes time to develop a good medium trot. That doesn't happen overnight, right? Because it requires a certain strength, it requires a certain suppleness and flexibility, and that takes some time to build. Yeah. Then let me go back here to the group and look what else is there. Huh? Sarah Isherwood says, I just found this group today. Happy to be here as I have a seven-year-old off the track thoroughbred that I'm retraining as a saddle horse, raised and raced well, but has many mental challenges as her life after the track was not kind before me here. 2 years of trust building. Now we're starting to groundwork. I'm excited to learn more of building the top line from the ground. Yeah, that's thoroughbreds often have a pretty hard life, on the racetrack and off the racetrack. So let me see if I can make this bigger. But yeah, conformation is sort of typical thoroughbred, right? Yeah, hind leg, the croup is pretty nice, hind legs are pretty nice, but you see also this pointy transition from the lumbar spine to the croup. There's not a lot of muscles here in the loin, but if the transition from the lumbar spine to the pelvis has this break, if it's not a smooth flowing line, but it's a pointy line, then the forces of the hind legs don't get transmitted very easily into the lumbar spine and the thoracic spine, and then these horses find it difficult to access the back muscles in general. Again, it's a horse with prominent withers, and then you see there the back after the withers is a little lower, and then it rises up towards the top of the croup. And the neck, set on a little bit low, so there's a bit of a dip in front of the withers, but the length of the neck is okay. Yeah, I mean, building trust and relationship and so on is the first thing, right? Before you can do any physical work with the horse. That can take a long time if they were abused in some way, right? And then, with a horse like that, I would start by lunging, double lunging. Then, in hand, you can explain to her certain things, like you can do walk-halt transitions in hand. You can do a little simple sidestepping in hand just to improve lateral balance and flexibility. And out of that, combination of lunging or double lunging and work in hand, you should be able to develop the musculature and make the muscle strong enough to carry the rider, etc. So let me look at the Q&A. Margaret Mello says, I think my horse is quite deep in the throat latch area. He doesn't salivate, but sometimes chews on a bit, especially during lateral work. Before doing in-hand work or riding, I do lateral flexions to both sides. I also hold both sides of the bit and raise his head high in the air above my head for a few seconds, then release it. He drops his head low and chews the bit. This raising of the head was something I learned at a clinic to release the pole. Is this something you recommend? Yeah, it can. With some horses, it's almost like the pole or jaw are caught on something, you know, and then you, by lifting the head and neck straight up and maybe even flexing the head at that raised position a little bit, that unlocks something. And then when you release the reins and let the horse lower his neck, then they're often looser and more through, you know, more on the bit and so on. It's kind of interesting thing. Yeah, and if the horse is deep in the throat ledge, then it can be challenging to position the horse and flex the pole longitudinally and so on. And yeah, I think it's probably a good idea then to do lateral flexions before you get on. And yeah, the raising of the head can be useful. It's like with everything, probably not every horse needs it or not every horse benefits, but if you find that your horse improves with it, then you can definitely do it. And just be prepared that it may not always help. Sometimes certain things, you know, or exercises or whatever can be great for a while and then they kind of fade, they outlive their usefulness, and then at some point you feel like I'm just going through the motions, but it's not really doing anything for the horse. Or maybe at some point it even feels like, oh, I'm getting negative side effects now. It's not really helping anymore. It's actually making the horse worse. And then it's time to, you know, shift gears, do something else with the horse. Yeah, very good. So now I'm looking a little bit down the page. Here. Let's see here. There's Mary Brossard. Let's see. So she doesn't want to say much, but I guess it's a subtle bread cross. I'll show it in a second here. A Janer says, concerning flexions, have you ever used or looked at the Masterson method? Students of ours have. I personally haven't yet, but I've heard good things about it. Seems to be very effective to do it. And so let's look at, so next horse. Looks actually pretty well muscled here. Nice croup. Yeah, the back is slightly longish, but not actually, it wouldn't bother me, you know. It looks strong enough in this picture. It's interesting. So here you have a withers that's also fairly prominent, but you don't have the dip in the back after the withers. So the line of the spine overall is, you know, not as concave here. So that's helpful. Neck seems like it has a good length and set on, you know, not very high, but not very low either. Yeah, so looks pretty nice. Hind leg angles seem okay here. The left hind leg that's on the ground seems like it's straight and yeah, not too much angle, not too straight in the hind legs either. So yeah, actually looks like a good horse. So, okay, let me go back to the Facebook group. Let's see. Here, let's see, Laura Krumbach Wolf is the next one. Let me share the screen of that. I'll make it a little bigger. That also looks like a nice horse. So nice big croup, you know. Hind leg angles seem okay. The transition from the back to the croup is okay. Slightly rising line of the back, but it looks sturdy enough, looks strong enough to me. So it shouldn't be a problem. Could have a little bit more muscling and so on. I don't know how old the horse is, how far advanced the horse is. I like the neck too, you know, the way it's attached to the shoulders and withers. Like it has a lot of depth here, which is nice, and a little bit of a natural curvature. And you can see the contours of the muscles around the neck. So it shouldn't be too hard for the horse to go on the bit. And so the way that the conformation looks, it should be able to get the horse balanced. So it's a Hanoverian mare. I'm caught at a bad moment. She usually has a sweet face. She's been off work for a year and a half, eager to get back to business. Yeah, that's why the muscling isn't very developed here in the loin, or here. The croup here is a little flat, right? When the horse is in training, this develops a little bit more. But yeah, looks like she's put together well, and should be nice to get back to work with her. So let me look at more pictures. So I'm trying to find some more interesting examples. So let me see here. I'm trying to look through the comments under Shanna's post. Maybe I'll go from the back. Some of them I've already looked at.
There were others in the group too.
In the group, yeah. Well,
I would love it if
yeah, maybe I'll do that. Go back to the posts in the group. Oh, funny, there's a picture that I wasn't shown earlier. Just refresh the screen. But it's posted yesterday. Suddenly, so weird. Yeah, very weird. So let me. So Chris ST says, "This is my 6-year-old Lusitano gelding. Not good photo. Sorry," she says. "I have had him for 6 months. He lost about 150 pounds, and I restarted him. He's green, but very willing. He's learning to accept the bit. His body has changed a lot. We've only been walking and trotting. He was so off balance, I was concerned, but through slow work, he's getting much better. He can canter on the lunge line and be fairly balanced now. I've just started double lunging him, work him 5-6 days a week, consistent and slow." Yeah, looks pretty good. Oops, I don't know if the pictures are from like the beginning of the work and now. So here's the one picture. I mean, it looks like a nice horse. And it looks like here he has some more weight on him, right? So that's probably the beginning of the work. There is a lot more belly. Huh? And but conformation is pretty nice. Yeah, here looks pretty good. So the nice, transition from the back into the croup nice and round, which is, what you find a lot with the Lusitanos, that makes the transmission of the energy usually nice, especially if it's a nice flowing line here across the top of the croup. The line of the back rises a little bit, but here the loin looks fairly stable and strong, so I don't think that's an issue. Neck is set on nicely. Could be a tad longer, and you don't see as much definition around the muscles here in the pole area as with some of the other horses we've seen. But, it's still young and hasn't had a lot of training, so you could maybe do some flexions here, lateral stretching, flexing exercises to mobilize the pole a little more, and then it'll be fine. But yeah, I think it's a nice horse all in all. So let me get back to the group. I'll have to check on YouTube also, but there nobody has a question there. See. Let me find some more pictures of horses. Oops. So I have to scroll a little bit to find some. So Tony Crombie Reading says opinion on his top line, would love some exercise to help build his hind. He's naturally heavy set in front. Last photos when I got him a few months ago. I've been working hard on getting him fit and keeping weight off as he's a very easy keeper. So it sounds like you haven't had the horse very long, just a few months. Let me share the screen. Let me take a look at different pictures. How interesting. So it's probably from the same day from after a riding session, it looks like, because he's all sweaty. So that's from the beginning when you first got the horse. Yeah, it's interesting when you compare the first two pictures, right? How different the horse looks. Like here, his head is up. Maybe he's listening to something here. I don't know. So you see that the top, the back line looks a little different when the neck is up, because the elevation of the head and neck, puts a little pressure on the middle of the back. So here the line of the back is a little bit more concave, and here in this picture he's relaxing, and the head is just sort of hanging a little bit, and then the line of the back is a little straighter, so the back is lifted a little bit more. The neck actually comes out of the withers pretty nicely, has nice depth here at the beginning, and then seems like he has enough space to come on the bit here. The lumbar spine rises a little towards the croup, but again, a little bit prominent withers, right? And the croup itself looks nice and strong and round. There's enough room for muscles here too. Hind leg angles seem fine. You probably have to also get him to engage and flex the hind legs. I don't know how much of that he would do on his own. So, but yeah, I'm asking for a little sidestepping with a bend against the direction, and then riding some turns and down transitions and so on. That'll gymnasticize the hindquarters. Yeah. Good. Let me see here on the Q&A. Sharon says, if you have time, I'd like your opinion of Efren's top line when owned by his previous owner 10 years ago and how it is today under my ownership. Posted photos or pictures last week on September 7th. Let me see if I can find that. I have to look for it, search for it. I'm that far down on the page now. France, but with searching, I might be able to. Yep, here it is. So it's 16 hand, 16-year-old PRE. Let me share the screen. Let me look at the pictures. And I wonder if that's the picture that, oops. Okay, now here, picture with a blue sky was when Efren was 6.5 years old and just gelded. He was previously owned by a classical dressage instructor. Unfortunately, being a novice rider, when I bought him 10 years ago, I wasn't able to keep up his training level. Yeah, he looks pretty nicely muscled. Looks slightly croup high to me here in the picture. So that, you know, if they're croup high, then the lumbar spine, of course, has to rise up to the croup, and that always makes it a little bit harder for the horse to really lift the lumbar spine and access those muscles. But yeah, shape of the neck looks pretty nice. Fairly deep here. Could be a little longer, but you know, a lot of these PRE stallions, especially, they can be a little thick in the neck and a little bit short. Yeah, so the croup of the Andalusians often looks a little different than the croup of the Lusitano. So with the Lusitanos, it's often more of a horizontal line here of the back to croup, and then the croup itself looks like a watermelon. Like if you cut it in half, the straight line is sort of horizontal, right? And then you have this perfect half circle behind it. With a lot of the Andalusian, it's like the half watermelon is slightly tilted with the top end a little ahead of the bottom end. So it gives the croup a little different appearance, and that often makes it a little bit more challenging to really get them to use the back properly. Like here you see it too. If you think of this as a watermelon, then the cut, you know, is not totally vertical, but like from here to here is a bit of an angle, right? And yeah, so you see this more curved line where it's concave here, and then it rises up to here. That will, you know, make it a little bit more challenging to get the horse to lift the back and swing. The neck, you know, has a good shape and size, basically. So the muscling in the croup looks good. That looks pretty even. Maybe it's a tiny bit less on the right than on the left, but also on the left, the color of the coat is slightly darker here than it is here. That makes a difference too, right? Yeah, seems to be, I don't know, maybe a little bigger here on the left shoulder than the right. It could also be the camera angle or the way the horse is standing. So I'm not quite sure. And yeah, here's same thing, right? So the rising lumbar spine and the angle of the pelvis will make it a little bit challenging here to access that, the muscles around the lumbar spine. But otherwise looks like a nice horse. And Beverly Sattler says here's a before after. Let's see if there are no pictures in the group. To refresh and check. Let me refresh the whole thing. Reading. So I don't see Beverly Settlers. Let me see if I can. Nope, doesn't show me one unless it's in a, could be in a comment somewhere, but we have Here, Ariane Janeer. So she says this is an 8-year-old Lusitano, 24/7 turnout on pasture. He's coming along nicely with winter exercises and riding him out with little pressure on the reins. However, I found a picture of him 3 years ago on a recent one. There's a different head position, but the neck looks different. Also added a 2-year-old picture in the field. He learned the lateral movements very well, but only now does he sustain a good canter. His canter departs were always good, but he lost the bascule after a few strides. Here. So that seems to be just the 2 pictures, right? One in the past. I'll share it in a minute. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing. I'm wondering if I'm missing one. Yeah, actually search for Ariane. Okay, also a different horse. So Ariane has already posted a picture of a Mangalarga, but that was a different one. Yeah, no, with the Lusitano, seems like it's just the 2 pictures, huh? Yeah, let me go share here. So we have that one and that one. So here in this, it's hard to say because here he's cantering, you know, and here he's standing. So in the canter picture, the croup and so on looks rounder, but of course, you know, in that first beat of the canter stride, you know, the outside hind is on the ground and lifting the forehand up, so the croup is tucked a little bit more, right? So it, the back lifts up in that moment, and the withers are lifted. But it looks like he has good conformation. The neck has a good length, and looks like it has a good shape. Like it should be, you know, easy to go on the bit. And here, so at the halt here, so the loin doesn't look as filled out here. Yeah, so you have the little convex spot here, and then the concave spot here, in the transition from the lumbar spine to the pelvis. Yeah, it happens with the horses that you know, have the bigger withers, and then the back line drops down, is a little concave first, and then goes up. So you often see that bit of a dip here. Yeah, but and you don't see that at all here in the canter picture. It almost looks like a canter depart actually, but it could just be in the canter, the first beat of the stride. So it shows you in a way how, you know, the canter can help develop the lumbar spine. How it can help you lift the back and the lumbar spine. So you could do trot canter or walk canter transitions at the lunge line or the double lunge line, you know, to develop that in your horse. Oh, Ariane says posted missing pictures. Let's see if I can find those. I'll have to backtrack a little bit. Yep. Look again here. Just shows me the same pictures. Oh no, here commentary. Okay, good. Good. So that must be the more recent one, huh? That looks more muscled. Yeah. So, but also with the head, and neck lower and neck in a horizontal position, there is no pressure on the top of the back. So the back may appear a little more raised here than if you raise the head and neck. But it looks like he's filled in and he's got more muscles, and so that's nice. But you can compare it to this picture. So you see here's less muscling on the back and the croup. And the head is held a little higher, which will then tend to, create sometimes a little bit slightly lowered back. Whereas, here, there's no pressure coming from above onto the back, so it's easier for him to lift the back and the here lumbar spine as well. All right, let me look at the Q&A. So Sharon France says, okay, opinion on Efren, we did that. And she says, thank you very much, that's really helpful. Good, I'm glad that you find the observations useful. Beverly says, oops, I'm new to Zoom, struggling to add pics. Yeah, in Zoom you can't actually, but you can post them in the group, in the Facebook group. Zoom doesn't allow posting pictures for some reason.
It's not social media. It's,
okay.
It's a video conferencing
app.
Actually, you could share the screen to them, but this is
good. Here, Ilka Chapman says, I've sent through a picture of my Andalusian. I would love to know your thoughts. Read area muscle atrophy over the croup. Is this common? Ilka Chapman, didn't we talk about one of your horse? Didn't talk about your horse yesterday? There's been so many horses. Let's see what I can find. Yeah, we did. We did talk about that yesterday. Yeah, we did. I don't know, maybe you weren't there yesterday. So just share the screen real quick. So yeah, we did talk about that extensively yesterday. So I won't repeat that today, but you can watch the recording of yesterday's lesson. Yeah, good. Let me have a look here. Refresh that screen. Yeah, so Beverly, if you attach or if you post the pictures in the Facebook group, then we can look at them. And Jen is saying, I've posted and tagged pics in the group this morning. 13-year-old thoroughbred Jennifer S. would love comments if possible. Let me look. I have to search for that. Jennifer S. Okay. Alrighty, here it is. Oops, well, I'll share the screen. So let me just take a look at the pictures real quick. Also here on the side. Good, so it's 4 pictures. Yeah, sort of also typical thoroughbred build in a sense. The croup is nice. I like the roundness of the croup. The angles of the hind legs look pretty good too. big withers, you know, so you have that rising back line again, but it looks strong enough here. See, there's still a little room for muscling here next to the withers and behind the shoulder blade, so that's not very developed yet. So she needs to basically flex the hind legs a little more to be able to lift this and fill out. Neck has sort of a medium length, and it's set on not especially high, not especially low. It's not bad overall. Maybe slightly croup high, which then makes it more difficult to access the back muscles and lumbar spine muscles. So here the muscles in front of the withers could fill in more, and again it's something that comes with flexing the hind legs more under the body. And here in motion and under saddle, she actually looks better than just standing there. So you see that the neck has a nice shape naturally, so it has enough length. When you see her standing there, then you're not quite sure. Could be long enough, maybe not. But yeah, in the written pictures, you see that there is enough room. Croup is pushed a little bit up. The thoroughbreds like to do that though. They like to push a lot with the hind legs, so they tend to push the croup up and not sit and flex unless you ask them to. So that's something to then work on. And so that looks like a trot lengthening or something. And same thing. There's a little bit of a sense that here actually that the outside hind leg might be escaping a little to the outside, and then the outside hip would be pushed up. Yeah. Good. Very good. So let me check on YouTube again. Okay, Ilka says, sorry, I missed yesterday. I will look back on that info. Yeah, we talked about it quite a bit actually. And back to Facebook. Just have to refresh the screen, see what's there. Just looking for more horse pictures. And here Doris Berbe says here a few more pictures of Rocco, my 16-year-old Trakehner gelding. He's been out of work since April this year due to a tendon injury in his right front, but from next week on we're allowed to slowly start again. Happy about comments. Let me share that. Well, actually, before we do that, I saw Jen just posted another comments. She said, thank you. Yes, that right hind does escape out to the side, something we're working on. Yeah, if in the left turns, the outside hind leg escapes, you could move your outside hip and leg more back and touch the horse with your outside leg. Maybe think of riding a hint of haunches in, so you can also support that outside leg with the outside rein. Actually, if you shorten the outside rein just a little bit and bring your outside hip and leg back, you can use the outside leg and rein together. They support each other in bringing the croup a little back to the inside. So that'll work. Whereas if you overuse the inside rein, the croup will go out to more, So Essa says, thank you, learned a lot today. I'll watch the rest later this evening. You're welcome. And so, okay, where were we? I was about to share a picture here, Doris Berbe. So let me look at the pictures before we look at the details. Oops, okay. So here's the first one. There. Let me see, now I've forgotten, what horse was that? Turkana gelding, okay, good. 16-year-old, out of work since April due to a tendon injury. In the right front, yeah. So, yeah, so the top line, the line of the back rises, you know, towards the croup, you know, and the croup itself isn't bad. Hind leg angles look like they're a little bit straight. Could be that it's a little difficult to access the lumbar spine and get the horse to lift the back because of this combination of the straight hind legs and then the rising lumbar spine towards the pelvis. Neck seems okay. Decent length, you know. There should be enough room for the horse to go on the bit and everything. So yeah, here actually, when I look at it. Yeah, in this picture, it almost looks a little smoother, a little better, the transition here into the croup. The hind legs almost look like they have a little bit more angle. Here, both hind legs are right next to each other. And here, the right hind is a little bit more under. So the stance then, yeah, makes a bit of a difference. The pelvis seems to have a different angle here. Slightly, you know. Here the hind legs seem a little bit more out behind. Here they seem a little bit more under, especially the right one. So that gives the pelvis a little bit different position. And so here it's from behind. Oh, croup looks pretty well developed. I mean, maybe the left side of the croup is a little flatter than the right. But of course, you know, the left side is in the sun, the right side is more in the shade and has a darker color. So that can always throw you off a little bit too. But yeah, so that's, I guess, what we've seen before. No, Jen says, brilliant, have to run, has been excellent, and we'll watch the rest later. Yeah, there's not much more to come because we have to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes. And Doris says, would love to have a comment on Rocco. 16-year-old Turkana was 5 months off due to work tendon injury. What should I concentrate on to get him away from the front legs? Yeah, we just looked at him. Yeah, to get the horse better balanced, you can use sidestepping exercises with the bend against the direction of travel to get the inside hind leg more under the body. And then you can use turns and down transitions and half faults, etc., to flex the grounded hind leg. Often it's good to alternate, you know, engaging the left hind, engaging the right hind. That you can do that on straight lines, on curved lines. You can do this on diagonals, or combining a diagonal with a few steps straight ahead, parallel to the long side, diagonal again, and so on. And then, if you repeat the cycle of engaging the hind legs, flexing the hind legs often enough, then they develop more and more collection and suppleness behind, and then also the front legs have to support less of the weight, and the hind legs do more. All right, so let me look back here on YouTube. Okay, nothing new there. Yeah, but oops, hold on. Mira says, posted a couple of photos of my gelding. He's slightly cowhocked and a little lazy at times. Let me see if I can find that, and then we need to wrap it up soon because it's getting late here. Now, which Mary is it? Is there several? Yeah, Mary, if you could tell me your last name, then I can look it up, because we have like 4 or 5 different Marys, and then it makes it difficult to find. Oh, Doris says, thanks a lot. That's really helpful. Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad it is. And Mary Bates. Okay. She said my internet is dropping out. Let me see if I can find that. Mary Bates. Here we go. Oh, okay. She says, I acquired Dylan on Friday. He was raised. It's like our son. He was raised 6 days before this picture. He's going to have some downtime, about 6 weeks before he starts on his new career. I think the groundwork will be essential to his education. However, I'm told he doesn't like to be lunged, so I will have to try and convince him otherwise. Yeah, but it could be that he either doesn't know lunging or he has had bad experiences. So with these ex-race horses, you really have to start the whole training process from scratch. The best thing is to have 2 people when you start lunging them. You know, one person leading the horse on the circle, hand walking basically on a circle with a lunge whip in hand, the other person holding the end of the lunge line in the middle of the circle, and then you can gradually teach the horse to lunge that way. And yeah, he'll need quite a bit of downtime, I think. I don't know, that 6 weeks will be enough. And then it's good to develop a relationship first. The change in lifestyle from the racetrack to, you know, being a dressage horse or just a regular riding horse is big. So in the picture, he looks fairly long-legged, like square or almost like an upright rectangle. Those horses have usually balance issues because the center of gravity is high and the support base is small. So with him, I would start lunging, but maybe also do some exercises on the ground where you do some walk halt transitions, and maybe ask him to yield the haunches, or move the hips around the shoulders around the hips, just playful, easy stuff where he just learns that he can shift the weight more to the right or more to the left. He can support himself with any of the 4 legs. Because if he feels unbalanced, if he feels like he might fall over, then he'll brace against the ground and against the rider, and then aids won't go through, etc. So yeah, take it slow, and develop the relationship, and then help him get a better body awareness, help him figure out where his feet are, etc. All these things, right? Oh, Mary says, thanks. I think my picture of my other gelding didn't appear. Thanks for the info about Dylan. Yeah. Okay. Well, I can look if there are any other pictures from you. Just seized on that. Let's look again. Yeah, no, I only see the Dylan pictures here. Jan is giggling over there because of our son Dylan. So yeah, Facebook is weird sometimes. It some doesn't show some of the pictures for some reason. But yeah, we could wrap it up. And yeah, let me just read the comments here. Margaret Mello says, thanks for another great session and answering our questions. I have to go as I have an early start in the morning. Me too. Sherry says, my second day with you today. I'm trying to get pictures up of my gelding for tomorrow. Thanks again. Yeah, you're welcome. Christina says, thank you for your interesting answers and for your time. There's so much to think about. That's true. It never gets boring. There's always more, right? There's always more details, more angles from which you can look at things. And yeah, it's an interesting subject. Good. Liz on YouTube says, thanks, Thomas. Lots of great information and advice as always. Well, you're welcome. Well, I will see you tomorrow, maybe. Well, I guess in tomorrow's video, we show a little bit of lunging, double lunging, work in hand, and stuff like that. So groundwork, exactly. So you can, yeah, maybe have more questions tomorrow, or, you know, we can look at more horse pictures. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll see you tomorrow.